Hello and welcome to Drunk on Tea. Today I've picked up this new paint set by the Army Painter, the John Blanche Series, to allow you to paint your models in that famous John Blanche style. Now before I begin, I'd just like to say a big thank you to our Tea Lover channel member Jenkins. Thank you so much for the support and allowing me to pick up paint sets like this to show you on the channel. So these are the paints that you get in the set. It's a nice selection of colours in that John Blanche colour scheme. So lots of browns, earthy tones, yellows and reds. One thing I do like about these Army Painter paints is that for the ones with weird names, they give you a description of the paint on the side. As well as this paint set, I've also got the Volume 2, which has some different colours. So let me know if you'd like to see me use these colours in a different video. But for now, I'm just going to use the Volume 1 set. I'm going to paint this Plague Bearer model in a John Blanche style. So first thing I've done is I primed the model white to give us that bright base coat to work from. And the first I'm coming in with is the warm skin shade paint. And here, these paints here have ball bearings in, which makes shaking them up so much easier. And I'm going to apply this shade all over the skin. Now I know this is a shade paint, which seems a bit weird to start with first, but it's going to give me that sepia tone base that is so iconic of John Blanche's artwork. So by applying a layer, I'm going to see how it works, how it reacts to the primer, and what effect it gives, and how I can build on it for the rest of this model. It's flowing on like a shade paint should. It's running into all of those recesses, but also staining a bit of the top surface. So hopefully this will give me that really nice effect that I can use to build on with this Plague Bearer to get a really good looking John Blanche inspired model for games of Warhammer Age of Sigmar or 40k. So giving it one pass, you can see how it has stained all of it, really added definition to the recesses. But I think I'm going to come through with another pass just to darken this down a bit. So I'm just applying a little bit more of that warm skin tone shade all over my model. Now, I don't use Army Painter paints very often. I got some of the war paints when they first came out, the very first ones, and I didn't like them at all. They were chalky. The coverage wasn't great. I didn't get on with them. This is my first time coming back to Army Painter in a really long time. I'm willing to give them a second chance and see how the paints work. Let me know what you think of Army Painter paints in the comments below. Are you a fan, or do you prefer Citadel? So after that second pass of the warm skin shade, I've now got a nice base colour on my model, and all the definition has really come out. So I'm going to test out the Speed Paint Blood Moon Red. For this I'm going to paint bits of guts hanging out of his belly here. As this is a speed paint, it should just take one coat. So I'm just going to apply this over those guts, let the paint do its work. Hopefully it will give a nice bit of definition, sinking into those recesses and working with that shade paint we've already applied to give some nice definition to these areas. And I'm also going to pick out some of these open wounds on the model, bits where you can see some muscle underneath, things like that. I'm just going to apply some of this speed paint into these areas, see what effect it gives. I've not really got a plan for this model, I'm just kind of going with it, applying colours as I see fit. That speed paint's given a really nice effect. It has actually given a really good muscle look to all those open wounds and the guts. So now it's time to use some of the other paints. So I'm going to use this Blighted Green here. It's a really dark green colour. For this I'm going to pick out some of the boils on this Plague Bearer. Now this is one of the real big changes I noticed from the original war paints. These new Fanatic ones really do give good coverage. Look at that, just one coat and it's solidly covered those boils. And the colour's absolutely great. It's not far off of Incubi Darkness by Citadel. So I can see a lot of usage for this paint. For now, I'm just going to pick out all of those boils on this plague bearer, giving them that dark green colour to look like pussy boils all over this Nurgle creature. I'm being careful to avoid any of the skin that we've already painted with that wash, but just carefully picking out these boils with a little bit of blighted green. In the next steps, I'll come through and highlight them. You can see that's given a really nice, dark, solid, rich green colour all over those boils. So now I'm mixing about a 50-50 mix of blighted green and ivory white. And this I'm just going to apply to the tops of the boils, just to give them a little bit of a highlight. So this John Blanche style is a bit different than my normal painting scheme. Very limited in colours. You always have to work sort of down quite often. So you start with some of your lighter colours and then come through and apply darker colours, which is different to how I normally work. But this set allows you to do that quite easily. With the boils highlighted, they're looking pretty nice. We've got that look of painful, sore boils. So I'm going to test out the darkness, which is a really dark blue. With this, I'm going to paint the spines going down his back. Once again, this has got fantastic coverage. 1 or 2 coats is all you're going to need. But because it is so dark, obviously I've got to be really careful around the skin we've already painted with that shade. I don't want to accidentally get any of this over areas that I don't want, because there's no whites or anything in the set, so tidying back up will be quite difficult. So you can use your own whites and things if needed. I'm also going to paint the sword to this plague bearer as well. Where this is just the white primer, it's going to take a couple of coats to get a solid layer of the darkness, but that's fine. The coverage is nice and the paint's flowing on really smoothly, only needed thinning down a little bit. So I can safely say Army Painter have improved on their war paints line with these new Fanatics. They're so much better than the original ones I tried out years and years ago. With those details picked out, it's really darkened down that sword and those spines. The model's starting to look quite good already in this style. Now I'm going to shade those details. For that I'm using this Grimdark Shadow wash. It's kind of like the black wash in this set. So I'm just applying it carefully over those spines, trying to not get this over any of the skin. We shaded with that sepia tone. I'm also going to apply it all over the sword as well. Hopefully it'll add some definition to the sword and make highlighting a little bit easier in the next few steps. If you enjoyed the video, please press like. If you want more videos, press the subscribe button and ring the notification bell. If you would like to support the channel and become a member, please press the join button down below. So after that Grimdark Shadow wash has dried, it has darkened down those areas a little bit, sunk into the recesses, added a little bit of definition to the sword and the spine. It's now to highlight, doing about a 50-50 mix of the darkness and ivory white. For this I'm just going to catch the tops and bottoms of each of the spines. Letting that shade do its work in the middle, while leaving a little bit of the darkness showing through as well. And on the sword I'm going to catch all of the raised details with a bit of this mix as well. These paints seem to mix together really well. The ivory white brightens up any colour. Because it's not a pure white, it will fit into the paint scheme if I use it as an individual colour as well. So I'm just carefully highlighting all of the raised details on the sword. That highlight applied, you can see how it's brightened out some of those details, picked out the edges of the sword. I feel like I need another highlight just to get the sharpness of that sword showing through. So I'm going to add a bit more ivory white to that mix. So now it's probably about 3 parts ivory white to 1 part the darkness. Now I'm just applying a really small edge highlight within the one I just applied. Just to give a nice transition up to the brighter colour and give the impression of a sword with some really sharp, jagged points all over it. I'm not worried about doing this to the spines, just focusing on the sword, catching all of those sharp points with a highlight of this mix. With the sword highlighted, it's now given the impression of a nice sharp sword on the model. So next thing I'm going to try to paint is the eye on this plague bearer. For this I'll use the Moonbeam Yellow. Fits in with that colour scheme. Should give a really eerie looking yellow eye poking out the middle of this plague bearer's forehead. So I'm just going to carefully apply a bit of Moonbeam Yellow. Once again, the coverage is really good, especially for a yellow colour. So I'm just applying that Moonbeam Yellow. And then I'm coming in with the darkness again. This is the darkest colour in this set. And I'm just going to apply a horizontal line going through the middle of that yellow. This will give the impression of a pupil sticking out. Now that the eye's painted, that is the character added to the model. And just to finish off the face, I'm going to paint the teeth next. So for this I'll use ivory white, and I'm just going to pick out all of the teeth on this plague bearer so I can see how this colour works on its own. But once again, it goes on really smooth. It's a really nice, just off-white colour. It's perfect for picking out these teeth. Makes them stand out without being too bright for the rest of the colour scheme. Said John Blanche's work is so iconic in the Warhammer world. It's really nice to have a paint set finally that allows you to emulate some of those famous artworks. This set really is working on this plague bearer. I've definitely got John Blanche vibes. So now with some Banshee Brown, I'm going to start painting the horn and the nails on the model. So for this, I'm just going to base coat the horn sticking out of his head. I'm going to give it a jagged line where it meets the flesh to his skull, so it looks like it's growing out of the flesh. I'm also going to do the same to his toenails as well, just catching those with a bit of this Banshee Brown. This is a really nice solid brown colour, a little bit more of a pure colour than anything else in the set, but it works as a nice base for the effect I'm going to apply onto these horns. So with that brown applied as the base coat to the horn, got a nice solid colour. So now it's time to try and paint some growth markings on the horns. So for this I'm mixing Banshee Brown with Ironclad Grey. It's about a 50-50 mix, and I'm going to start doing some lines going up the horn. So every sort of point, change of direction, anything like that, I'm just picking these lines out. I'm doing a line going up the horn and doing the same on the toenails as well, making sure I leave a little bit of Banshee Brown at the bottom and around each of the lines. And now I'm coming in with some Ironclad Grey. I'm going to repeat the process, but each line is going to be a little bit shorter than the one before. So hopefully after a few layers of different colours, I'll get a really nice transition going up the horn, giving the impression of growth lines as it's grown out of the head. Don't forget to also do the same to the toenails. These are going to be very small, but they'll tie the model together and give the same colours at the top and the bottom to give a nice unified look to the plague bearer. So now I'm mixing some ivory white into that Ironclad Grey, brightening that grey up as I do the next line on the horn. So make sure each one of these is slightly shorter than the one before. They all meet at the very tip of the horn. There's a nice transition of those colours as they go from darker to lighter. Once again doing the same to the toes as well, just catching those with a bit of this ironclad grey and ivory white mix. At this stage, I'm also just going to catch the very tips of the fingers as well. Haven't done the rest of the colours to the fingernails, they're too small. I'm just catching the tips with a bit of this mix. And finally, with some ivory white, I'm going to finish off those lines on the horns. So this is now just the very tips of the horn I'm catching with a little bit of ivory white. Just give the impression of the brightest part at the top of the horn. I'm going to do the same to the toes as well, just to finish off this effect. Really tie this model together. So I'm just catching the very tips of those toenails with a small spot of ivory white. With the ivory white applied, that is the Plague Bearer painted in the John Blanche style. Used all of the paints in the Volume 1 set, except for the metallic. There isn't really any metallics on this model. Let me know in the comments down below, what do you think of the John Blanche paint set? Do you like the colours? Do you like the style? Are you looking forward to emulating some of that iconic 40k artwork in your own miniatures? And if you'd like to see me test out the Volume 2 set as well, mixing the two together to see what results I can get, please let me know in the comments down below as well. But thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video, and happy painting!